Hey everyone, welcome back to Markets for Millennials. The inspiration for this video came from a question that at CB Pura Vida, shout out to him, sent me on Discord. It got me thinking about an observation that I made recently. I'll talk about what this chart means in just a minute, but I want to zoom in for a second. If you recall, we had a massive sell down on May 19th, right? And so from our close on May 18th to our close on May 19th, Bitcoin went down over 14%. But what was interesting was that from the close of the previous day to the low, it was a 30% candle, like from the open to the low, and which was just crazy, right? And what has been happening on GBTC, right? So Bitcoin has been kind of sideways for a couple of months now. Now with GBTC, what's really interesting is it's almost the same pattern, except over here in April we didn't make a higher high than from our high in on February 19th. We've been progressively getting higher and higher on the premium, or on the discount, I should say. I just want to make sure I'm clear. The discount ever since, ever since we got into, let me take a look at my notes really quick. February 26th, right here, was the first day that GBTC started trading negative, right around that time, February 25th and 26th. And ever since then, we've been increasing in the discount, the level of discount, NAV discount. And I believe somewhere in the end of April, I want to say the end of April, our discount was something like 20 to 25%. It was enormous. And a lot of people had been complaining about that for some time. A lot of people really unhappy. Even though I've said before in my previous videos that the discount, like when it's at discount, that's the right time to buy. Because if you're actually buying when it's at a premium, that means you're overpaying for GBTC, and you don't want to overpay. You want to buy it for less than it's worth, so that you can sell it when it eventually gets to premium. And my base case, again, just so that everybody knows where I'm at, my base case is that I think that by the end of the Bitcoin bull market, GBTC will be at a premium, if it's not converted into an ETF. If it's converted into an ETF, then the premium discount is going to go away. But if it is not an ETF by the end of the Bitcoin bull market, then it is, I believe it's going to be at a premium. And I don't know how much the premium will be, but I believe it will be at a premium. So anyway, the question, I mentioned CB Pura Vida mentioned this to me, asked me a question about this. Because I've done a lot of videos on GBTC, so that made me think about what's been happening on GBTC's price action. And the reason I started out with highlighting the drop that we had on Bitcoin on that one day on May 19th, overnight May 18th and into May 19th, is because GBTC, even to the low, to the wick low from the previous day, was down a maximum of 18.5%. But by the close of trading, GBTC had only dropped 5%, which that threw me. I'll be honest with you, that threw me, because normally when Bitcoin is dropping, GBTC drops more, right? So if you go back, to sorry, my chart's got all these different colors from some things I was doing. So if I go back now and I overlay GBTC over Bitcoin, what do you see? You see basically as we go, GBTC peaks, and I've talked about this a lot, and then sideways and down, and then boom, and then sideways, and then boom, and then sideways, and then boom to the peak. And so like that's what GBTC does, right? So when Bitcoin is moving up, when Bitcoin is you know, appreciating in price, GBTC usually will outperform it. But then the downside of that is when Bitcoin is consolidating sideways or dropping in price, GBTC will typically underperform to a significant degree. So the fact that that didn't happen, to me, was really interesting. So now let's look at a couple other things too. All right, so when we had this drop on May 19th, this wick down, you know, it touched down about 30,000, right around the level that we consolidated down to at the end of January. Then when you look at GBTC, it's the same, right? But I halfway expected, I'll be honest with you, I halfway expected our price to fall even further, right? You know, in previous videos, I had made this this 55% box. I'm honestly surprised, given that that Bitcoin's drop from the peak to the low was more than 50. It was about 53.5%, I believe, 53 to 55%, somewhere in that range. But GBTC, from its wick high to its wick low, was only 52%. And so I find that very odd. And so, you know, CB Pura Vida made me think about this again. Through his question, made me think about this again. And so I basically spent some time researching, because the question got brought up: how do we know how many shares Grayscale, I should say, how many shares does Grayscale issue? How much Bitcoin does it own? Is there any way that we can figure out how those things change day by day, or week by week, or month by month? And basically that sent me down this rabbit hole. And I'm going to share some of the information that I looked at. So the starting point here that we want to go to here is looking at GBTC, Grayscale's website. And what you want to be apprised of is, first we'll start with the investment terms. And for a little bit of a breakdown of this, we have Alan Au on Twitter. He had a really good tweet, Alan Au 11 on Twitter. Shout out to Alan, where he talked about Bitcoin's price correction connected with potentially connected with GBTC shares unwinding and unlocking. And so he talks about here, let's see, here we go. He talks about the issue of the lockup period in a couple of these tweets. I don't know if you can see. He keeps mentioning this 6-month unlock. So if we go to Grayscale, talks about in the investment terms, secondary market trading. So when somebody makes an investment, when you have a major accredited investor that invests in GBTC, they purchase shares at NAV. So that's kind of what Alan Au is talking about. They have basically 3 ways to trade and to buy shares, and so all of them end up buying them at NAV, at the net asset value, right? So it's pretty important to understand what the net asset value is, and there's an easy way to calculate it, but I'm not going to spend the time on that in this video. And right here is the important information to note, because an investor's shares of GBTC are locked up for 6 months. It's almost the same way you think of like an IPO, a limited IPO, because there's usually a lockup period where the initial investors are not allowed to move their shares until a certain period of time has ended. So with GBTC, there's a 6-month holding period. And so shares are eligible to become unrestricted, you see here, and resold in the public market. Right? So that means that once an institutional or once a large investor, accredited investor, holds for 6 months, they're allowed to sell it if they want to. Right? And so that's pretty important. And so that sent me down this rabbit hole, right? So I've got a series of, I'm trying to start this as close to the halving as possible, May 9th, I believe, of 2020. I've got the Bitcoin chart on the daily, and I've got this orange line, which is an overlay of GBTC's price action. Right, so on the side you see the percentage increase overall, and I've got a series of vertical lines. Now, this November 4th vertical comes from an article that was shared with me, where it was talking about inflows, and so the purpose of this article was that I was asked, is there any way that we can find more information like this? How can we know that there was an inflow into GBTC? It has a chart which I've looked at a little bit. It talks about basically you have Bitcoin plus dollars in Bitcoins and the number of shares issued. It's kind of interesting. So the question was, is there a way that we can figure out, when Grayscale is buying more Bitcoin or issuing more shares and things like that? The date of this article was the first marking point, right? So it makes sense if you follow, you have Bitcoins in the news because it's moving in its bull run, and it's by this point it's not far. Let's see, it's only about $5,000 away from its previous bull market peak from 2017. Right, so obviously it's in the news. People are trying to get exposure in all sorts of different ways, and so you see a lot of people flooding into Grayscale, into GBTC. So then I went looking a little bit further at what was going on. I was intrigued by the idea of the unlock, and I was also intrigued by what's been going on lately, and that was, I don't know if you saw it when I pulled up Grayscale's website, but essentially if you go to Grayscale and you try to, let me see if I can do it live here with you guys. If you go to, oops, I think this is going to go gnarly on me now, but basically if you, oh, here we go. Let's see if I can do this now. If you go to Grayscale Bitcoin Trust, first thing that pops up is that private placement is unavailable, and so this has been something that's been kind of a big deal. So December 21st, if I go to, I think it's this article, in late December you saw news of Grayscale halting investment in the Bitcoin and Ethereum trusts, and so the question is why. And so in this article, one of the things that happened was it was just talking about after Bitcoin broke $20,000, right? That was over its previous bull market peak. And one of the things that was cited was this idea of the 6-month lockup period ending. And I don't know if the article was trying to make the point that it's correlated or not, right? But then shares purchased back in June are going to be freely tradable, and so I did not go mark what was going on the chart at this time, right? But in June, right around this time, Bitcoin at this point was trading just south of $10,000, and so the return potentially, if you had bought GBTC back then, let me go to my GBTC chart for a second. So back in June, your GBTC price is around $10. So when, let me go back. So December 20th-ish, December 21st, right, your GBTC price closes at just over $30, right? So this article is making the point, that I think it's maybe trying to correlate the fact that people who had their shares back in June, when it was trading at 10, are now going to be looking at selling their shares and taking that huge profit from their purchase from the premium price, right? So I tried to chart. I charted that with this red vertical, right? So that's the signal that GBTC stops, or that new investments are halted. Okay, but it was a quick turnaround, right? So you have this price appreciation, and then January 12th was when they reopened investments, right? And then at the same, just a few days later, so that's the green vertical. Then this gold yellow vertical, which was January 19th, GBTC announced there was a purchase of, there was an article. Let's see, here it is, right? Okay, so here was the article about Grayscale reopening their crypto trusts as the Bitcoin price was climbing, right? So once again, it's interesting to note that they were, as Bitcoin and GBTC made, or Bitcoin itself made new highs, you know, they close new investments, but then they reopen it after, you know, Bitcoin was already up another, what is this, another 55%. It's pretty crazy, actually. And so they reopen it at that point here, January 12th, and then let's see here, where I think I'm missing some articles. Yeah, I don't know where my other article went. So then on January 19th, they bought another $600 million worth of Bitcoin in a span of 24 hours. So this is what was going on the Bitcoin chart between when they announced, right? It was actually a little bit higher at the time, but from the all-time high, you know, 14.5% down on when the announcement came out about them buying more Bitcoin. And you know that if the article is showing that here on the 19th, it meant that they probably bought it earlier. But I'm just marking where information came out about this. Right, so then what's really interesting is February 23rd, I have right here. This article is actually really interesting because it was not totally accurate. This was a miscalculation of the premium. But the point of it is that in late February, for the first time ever, GBTC traded at a discount rather than at a premium. And it's also interesting to note that from that point on, you never see GBTC higher than where we were on February 19th. GBTC has not reclaimed that high since then. It's been sideways and down. So that's interesting for a number of reasons, right? But let me just continue. And then on March 10th, this is what this next article was. You see on March 10th, Grayscale halts new investment in GBTC. And at this point, it's trading at a 15% discount. So they stopped it again here. But so I was trying to figure out what was going on here, because the previous time they did that, price ran up, and it did kind of come up again. But what really struck me was that something, obviously if you look at the chart since then, something's going on, right? Because once the discount started here, price has been sideways and down. And one of the things that was happening is right at the same time, DCG, Digital Currency Group, they announced a plan to purchase shares of Grayscale Bitcoin Trust. And of note, you see here, they were authorized to purchase up to $250 million worth of shares of GBTC. And obviously, this was a really big deal. A lot of people thought, ooh, this is going to be great. GBTC is going to go up. So that was also on March 10th. So you do see a little bit of a run up in price on Bitcoin, but you don't see that same run up on GBTC. There's only one point where we have a daily close that's higher, right, than that day, than this little spike right here from actually March 11th. Okay. And then, once we know what's happened since then, Bitcoin and GBTC have gone sideways and down. And so then the question is, what's going on? Well, here's what's interesting. I went and looked up Grayscale's SEC filings, one from April 30th and one from, I believe this was filed in the beginning of May, so just a month ago or so. But this was from Q1 of this year. It's basically their quarterly report. And what I thought was interesting, if you actually look at it, this is Form 8K. This was issued, reported on April 30th. I don't remember this. Maybe I wasn't paying attention, but there was a story about DCG upping their approval of purchase to $750 million worth of GBTC shares. I don't know if I heard that before and just forgot or ignored it. I don't know what's going on, but that was when I went back and looked, this was pretty amazing, because that's a 3x increase in the amount of shares that they are going to were going to purchase, and this was approved on April 30th. Okay, so April 30th, you have Bitcoin trading at, what is this? The close was about $57,775. You have GBTC still not making any new highs. It's just so interesting to me that this didn't fuel any massive GBTC buying to the upside, right? And then on May 7th, right, you have the quarterly report. Now, it's in the quarterly report that I found some really interesting things, and this is where I'm going to get into a little bit more of the nitty-gritty on what happens here. Okay, so we'll start with page 5, right? So on page 5, it actually shows you from the end of quarter 4 2020 to the end of quarter 1 2021 the quantity of Bitcoin. So you actually see between December 31st of 2020 and March 31st of 2021, the quantity of Bitcoin actually increases, right? So this is approximately 47,000 Bitcoin more under their possession than they had before. Okay, and if I scroll down to page 11 here, what was really interesting to note was, so it was actually about a little, what is this? Approximately 50,700 Bitcoin, but then less, a certain amount of Bitcoin for the sponsor fee. So I thought that was interesting. Okay, they do actually pay out. Sometimes they lose Bitcoin because of the sponsor fee. It actually does talk about that from time to time, the amount of Bitcoin held by them and thus the NAV, the net asset value of GBTC, can change as a result of the fact that they also pay out Bitcoin in the sponsor fee. So that's pretty interesting. Okay, if we go to page 7, this was also interesting. This is where you actually can find the increase in the outstanding shares, and so we'll zoom in specifically in this section right here. At the beginning of this period, meaning quarter 1 2021, you actually see that the outstanding shares was about 638.9 million, and they actually issued another 53.5 million shares. So GBTC has increased the number of outstanding shares by to now 692,370,100 shares. That's, so it looks like in the SEC filings each quarter, that's the best way to find how many shares are being issued. So that's what it seems like is the way to find out that information. I don't know if you can. I don't know if I couldn't find anywhere where they issued these, in a day-by-day basis or a week-by-week basis. I'm not really sure, but I would suspect that obviously these shares are, they were issued between the middle of January and the early part of March. So I mean, that's a pretty decent amount of time where this could have taken place. Okay. So there is that. Now, let's see. I want to go to page 14 for a second. So we've got some per share data, right? It's kind of interesting. I actually don't remember why I wanted to look at this. See if I can take a look really quick. Nope, I don't remember. I wanted to go to page 23. Page 23 of this report was really amazing. this was the unregistered sales of equity securities and use of proceeds. And what was interesting is this is regarding DCG, the parent company, and their open market purchases of Grayscale Bitcoin Trust. Now, I want to remind you that according to this filing in April 30th, the DCG was able to up its authorization to $750 million worth of shares. Okay, I just want to put that back in your head. Well, at the end of, see, like they made no purchases January or February. The report was on March 10th, and in that time, they purchased a total of 1,695,217 shares of GBTC. And if you do the math on that, then what that actually turns out to, what that turns out to be is only about $81,200,000. And that's a pretty big deal, because by the end of March, they still hadn't purchased $250 million worth of shares. And now they had up to $750 million worth of shares to use. So so that announcement was March 10th. So we'll go back to our chart here, and I'm going to do a date box. Let me see if I can do this. Okay, so from March 10th until March 31st, let me darken this. From March 10th to March 31st, 21 days, they had only purchased you know, almost $81.5 million worth, right? So that means they had, from their first filing, they still had, which was on, or from that filing on April 30th, that's 51 days that they had to purchase up to $250 million. Now, what we don't know is what happened in this gap after March 31st. So from April 1st to April 30th, what was the purchase amount there, right? But then on April 30th, you have that release that says, hey, they're going to now have $750 million able to purchase. So why do I make this big deal out of that? Well, it's hard to really know. I think that Alan is onto something here with the lockups and the selling and things like that. But what I think might be happening is DCG wants to purchase shares, and like any smart business or organization or person, you want to purchase them for as little as possible, right? Because you want to maximize your return, you want to maximize your purchase. And so I think it's really interesting that what has happened since April 30th, right, was GBTC has gone down, and so has Bitcoin. Bitcoin went sideways a bit and then has come down. So what I'm wondering is, during this time, and maybe we're not hearing about it. Well, so here's kind of what I was going to get at. I'm wondering, to go back to what I started with. Let me get rid of the GBTC chart for a second. What I'm wondering is, in this period of time where we had this massive wick down, I wonder if the reason why GBTC's chart looks a lot better, why GBTC didn't fall as much, is because as Bitcoin was selling down and as many people were liquidating their GBTC shares, I wonder if DCG was buying, Digital Currency Group. I wonder if they were buying. So what I'm going to be wondering, is, let's see. So if this report was in May, then we may not see Grayscale's Q2 report until July or maybe August. And what I'll be interested in seeing is, will this, the 3-month period between April, May, and June, will we see massive purchases at the end of, or in the month of May? And that's what I'm going to be looking for. I think it's something to definitely consider, because it would make a lot of sense. Why why, when, you know, GBTC normally underperforms to a significant degree, why didn't Bitcoin fall, or GBTC fall as much as Bitcoin did? And why, even though Bitcoin has been sideways, let's see what's going on with our chart here. Yeah, GBTC is also sideways since then. But how can that be? Because ever since Bitcoin has been going sideways, GBTC has been going like right here. We haven't made a higher high since February 19th. And so how can it be that when that's typically what happens with Bitcoin, with GBTC's price action in relation to Bitcoin, how can it be that it has not taken a much deeper dive? How come we haven't seen 55% down or 60% down or 70% down on GBTC, right? And to what extent is it related to the unlocking of GBTC shares? That's kind of what I'm thinking about, and only time will tell. I do think, I've said this in my previous videos, I think right here, I think this is our bottom in this cycle, and I think we may rocket up, or we may methodically move up, or we may chop a little bit and then move up, but I think this is the bottom of our current cycle, and I think that means that it's also about the bottom for GBTC as well. So to go back to Alan Au's tweet, he talked about, where is it? He talks about June and July being the place where the last places where shares are going to unlock, and I'm not sure if I totally agree with that. I mean, I understand what the point that's being made, but I think if it's a 6-month lockup period, and if the last time Grayscale had its investment open was, you know, March 9th or 10th, you know, even if you go by the end of February, let's just say it was February 28th, right? You're still looking at the end of August or the beginning of September that investors could potentially still unload their shares. And so I don't know that it's so simple to just say that Bitcoin and GBTC's price fluctuations are only to do with that. And I don't think that that's what Alan is saying, but I do think that there's got to be more to the story. And like I've said, I think that all of this stuff with DCG and their purchase plan with Grayscale for more GBTC shares and all that, I think that could be another part of this puzzle. And so that's kind of what I wanted to share. Again, it's one of those things, if you're going to invest in something, it's really important that you do your research, you make your own decisions. To me, I feel like this supports a long-term, my long-term view that in this cycle, GBTC will go higher. I think that it's only a matter of time before all the things that are happening are end up being you know, all the negative things are going to be behind us, and this whole DCG $750 million purchase plan is going to move GBTC to the upside, as well as when they do open up new investment. I think all of this is going to eventually work out in favor of GBTC and Bitcoin as a whole. So that's my view, that's my base case, but I'm always going to be flexible. I'm always going to be willing to change that view. And so I hope that this video was interesting to you, and I hope that you enjoyed and learned something about it. And I hope that it will encourage you and inspire you to go do your own research into anything that you're going to invest in. Obviously, I'm invested in GBTC and in Bitcoin, and so this is really important to me to try to get to the bottom of it, to learn from people like Alan, to consider questions and given by other people, and to learn from other people like Pura Vida here. And so that's my charge to you guys, is, you know, don't just rely on you know, on people to tell you when to buy or when to sell, but go learn about the things that you're investing in, and don't stop pursuing that knowledge, because it's going to make you a better investor, and it'll make you more profitable, and it'll help you to make a lot better decisions, both now and in the future. So thank you for watching. Go ahead and like and subscribe and share if this was helpful to you. Have a great day.